In round 5 of the European Team Championship, the leader, Russia, played against Azerbaijan. Now that was a really close match. In fact, it ended 2-2, 4 draws. The teams were very well matched. So that draw meant that other teams had a chance to close the gap on Russia, including France and Spain, who met each other in round 5. And I'd like to look at one of the games from that match. So we have Vallejo against Vachier-Lagrave. So Maxime has the black pieces here, and he played his favourite Najdorf variation, and it has gone very well indeed. Although black is a pawn down here, Vachier-Lagrave sacrificed his pawn. He has wonderful compensation. Look at these beautiful bishops. And in combination with the rooks, that puts white's position under enormous pressure. They're a very well-known combination of pieces. So rook g3 played by Maxime, hitting the pawn. Now if this is defended with rook f1, then bishop h3 is embarrassing. The rook has to move away and black just takes the pawn. So Vallejo played king e2, but then came bishop takes pawn check. Now, if white can just trade bishops here, then he would probably be okay. But if bishop takes bishop, black doesn't play rook takes bishop, but rook takes pawn check. And white's king is well and truly caught here. And a rook at the side of the board as well. And here, well, it's apart from losing material, it's very difficult to stave off mate, actually. So after bishop takes pawn check, Spaniard played king d2. But, I mean, his position is now just caving in. So black is now a pawn up. And, well, there are threats to take another one here. And possibly the e-pawn is going to drop. White is utterly lost. And Vallejo chose a swift end instead of just suffering. He took the bishop, and rook takes pawn was, well, that was the end of the game. White is losing material. There's the rook here, and if rook c2, then the knight on c3 is hanging. So a great game by Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and he now has 4 out of 5. He's playing a tremendous tournament. Instead of looking at or focusing on one game in particular, I thought I'd do something a little bit different today, and I'd look at several games, but just the finish of them, because there were some really nice finishes today. And, well, we need to catch up with what's happening with the world champion. This wasn't particularly pretty, but let me break the news to you. Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces against Yannick Peltier. We know that Yannick has been playing very well of late. He won a very nice game against Hikaru Nakamura a few weeks ago. Carlsen has been doing his best to make something of this endgame, but in fact it's pretty equal. He's trying to do something with this outside passed pawn. He should play rook b5 here, but with this well-centralised knight, black should be able to hold the draw without too many difficulties. But Carlsen thought he was making progress. He played rook g8, started trying to get in on these kingside pawns. Well, that's all very well, but unfortunately there is a tactical refutation. Knight e7 came as a bit of a shock, hitting the rook as well as the knight on d3, and after this, well, Magnus could have resigned in this position. He's simply a clear piece down, and, well, a few moves later he did have to resign. So Magnus having a really rough time. He's on half out of 3 at the moment. The Norwegian team actually did manage to win today. They dug Magnus out of trouble, but yeah, poor old Magnus is having a rough time. So let me move on and take a look at some nice finishes, not just the newsworthy ones. Well, I've got actually 3 games from the Croatia against Latvia match, and we've got Ivan Saric representing Croatia against our old friend Alexei Shirov. This was a Najdorf, and for a time Shirov was doing pretty well with black, but things have turned, and Saric, with the white pieces, is going for it on the king side. So his king is relatively safe, and he has the time to open up lines. And this bishop, what a wonderful piece, protecting the queen side, but also slicing down across black's king. Very nasty position. Shirov is lost here. But let's see how the game concluded. Bishop takes g5. So white opens up the king side, and Shirov doing his best to try to keep some lines closed, but let's see what happens. Queen h5, moving in for the kill. Rook h2, defending against the mate, and now Saric calculated a really nice finish, really neat. He played g7 check. This had to be taken. Rook g1 check. Now if the king steps here, then queen f7 will be mate. So the king went back in the corner, and now a crushing winning move played after a mere 8 seconds. Knight takes d6. So if rook takes queen, then knight f7 mate, and if queen takes knight, then rook g8 mate. Great finish by Saric. But Latvia fought back in this match. Let's look at a couple of other games. So this is Palac against Nisipeanu. This was a fascinating struggle, actually. Nisipeanu played a kind of hedgehog, and many of you will know that I'm a big fan of the hedgehog system for black. So Palac advanced his kingside pawns, and for a time his attack was looking very strong. But Nisipeanu has fought back. He's the exchange down, but he has a pawn for it, and he has superb pieces. This hedgehog bishop slicing across the board, and the rook looking pretty good as well, and that knight on a very solid square, also potentially threatening as well. But maybe the most important thing about this position is the relative security of the kings. Black's king behind these pawns, as is so often the case in the hedgehog, very secure, whereas white's king, after these pawns were thrown forward, white's king lacks cover, and you can see that straight away with this annoying pin. So Palac tried to seize the initiative. He stepped out of the pin, giving up the f-pawn, but he obviously thought that knight at e5 was going to turn the game around. If the rook moves, then it's true that perhaps rook c7 could come, maybe a bishop b3 as well to hit f7. Not so clear, but black found a very good riposte. Knight takes g5, and suddenly black's pieces have burst out, and this is highly unpleasant. Of course, if the knight takes the rook, then knight takes knight, check, and we'll take the rook on c1 with winning position. White played rook c2, but now this is absolutely deadly. Lack of pawn cover. King had to go back. Rook g3, and now Palac found nothing better than to play knight f7. But then rook g1 was mate. What a deadly counterattack. That reminds me of those counterattacks in football where, one side is, at a corner or something like that, and suddenly the ball goes down the other end. Long ball down, couple of passes, and whack. That is a great team effort. Next game, again from the Latvia-Croatia match. So Kants against Bukavshin. White has a very good position here. This pawn chain secures white's king, shuts out black's pieces, notably that knight, and white has a nice space advantage, a nice knight on d5. But it doesn't look that bad for black until you spot this move, bishop h5, and this pin is excruciating. Black just can't break free from that, and the finish was quite amusing. Well, c6 was tried because that pawn was vulnerable. The knight came back, king h7, this doesn't get better. Knight e4, well, after c6 came, then that means that d6 is weakened. The queen came across, and now a very simple way for white to win. He just exchanged off, bringing the king into view, and the queen switched across, threatening a deadly discovered check, as well as the pawn on d6, and that was enough for black to resign. Very neat indeed. Let me just show you one more game, and this was from the Netherlands-Slovenia match. Let me just take you back to this position. So it's Luc van Wely from the Netherlands playing white against Jure Borisek from Slovenia. So van Wely played bishop c5. Now, instead of moving the rook, Borisek found a very clever idea. He played queen g5. So the queen threatens the rook. And if rook f1, let's say, looks like a solid move, but then comes knight f4, threatening mate, and if rook g3, then queen c5. So queen g5 is a really tricky move, looking in two directions. So van Wely played the rook up the board. Still a threat to take on d6. But then came rook e1 check, the king goes up. Now the queen switched back, check. And again, that's a very nasty check to deal with, because if you play the natural move g3, then the queen cuts down, and there's no proper defense to queen f1 and mate. So van Wely played rook g3, and in this case, if queen e2, then you can actually take the rook, because after queen f1, white can escape. The check won't do much, the king just steps out to g3 and actually is relatively safe there. But after rook g3, black found an absolutely crushing move. This is really beautiful. Knight e3. Great idea. First of all, let's see what happens if white takes the rook. Then this forces checkmate. Double check and mate in the corner. Let's go back. But what happens if this knight is captured? Okay, let's see. Bishop takes knight. Pawn takes or queen takes is just the same, actually. Bishop takes knight, and now here's the point. Rook d1. A deadly doubling on the first rank, threatening mate, and because the rook is pinned, it can't step out of the way to give the king an escape square. And the only way that van Wely could avoid mate was by giving up his queen. But that was hopeless. Well, Luke struggled on for another 25 moves or so, but I'm afraid he couldn't avoid the inevitable, and black won this game with the extra queen. So there we go. Russia are in the lead after 5 rounds with 9 points. France have 8, and 2 other teams are in second place. Ukraine and Georgia also have 8 points. Tomorrow is a rest day in Reykjavik, and on Thursday they resume battle again. So Thursday is the next day, round 6. Thanks for watching.